Okay. All right, let's get started. So thanks everyone for joining us for our October meetup. We are planning to have a virtual one, I believe next month. So we're hoping to see folks in person for that one. But this one is going to be a really interesting, probably a shorter one. And we're going to be focusing on a kind of a more in-depth DeFi news recap for everything that's happened over the last month or so. I think there's been a lot of movement in the market, a lot of really interesting news pieces just around even institutional involvement in the space. A lot of major developments on the technical kind of research front. So there's a lot to cover there. And Imran and Johnson are going to be doing that recap. We'll have Victor, who's going to do a presentation on kind of covering the L2 space and everything that's happening around layer twos, particularly around scaling Ethereum. Unfortunately, Ravi from Polygon has been in touch with us. He's kind of stuck at an airport right now. So, and it was also like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for him. So he's gonna join us again another time, but we'll keep this one short and sweet, and we'll just kind of cover some really salient kind of news events, and then we'll kind of open it up for maybe like a more kind of casual discussion at the end. So with that said, we'll continue with the slides. And just a quick note to let everyone know that the discussion and any information here is shared for just informational purposes only. There's no financial advice or anything like that that's going to be provided from the team. Just a quick kind of overview of the team. Myself, Imran, Victor, Mark, who isn't here today, and Sophia, who is running the Ethereum developers meetup, Toronto meetup, and Johnson. So why don't we start at the end, Johnson, if you want to start with a quick like 1 or 2 liner just about yourself and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Johnson. I work as a marketing specialist at Virgo CX. It's a crypto trading platform. Serves as a good on-ramp or an off-ramp. But I'm also part of the organizing team of DeFi Toronto. I joined DeFi Toronto relatively recently, like in March, and it has been like an amazing experience since then. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
On
Thank you,
to
Johnson.
Mark, Victor.
Victor. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I used to work in traditional finance, in particularly pension investment. Currently, I'm doing fundamental research for a crypto hedge fund. Every day I have to read a lot of documents, reports, news, or so on and so forth. And I love data. So today, when I talk about L2, I'm going to share quite a bit of data with you. And so I'm very excited to have today's meetup. So I'm going to pass on to Imran.
Hey guys, my name is Imran. I've worked in this space since about 2016, 2017-ish for that run. We did work with Liam at a Bitcoin mining shop. And then we kind of started DeFi Toronto with the rest of the group in 2019. So we've seen pretty much all this space has to offer. Most recently, I'm working at this company called Lang Wallet. And what we're doing is a AI-based crypto wallet. So you'll be able to chat with your wallet all through iMessage right now, but we're running HTTP endpoints for developers, and also doing SMS coming out. So definitely check that out. It's called langwallet.ai.
Awesome. Thanks, Imran. And my name is Liam. I've been involved with the original kind of founding team of DeFi Toronto since around 2019, well before DeFi summer. Currently, right now, I'm working on with a team called Delve. We are building a new AMM focused on fixed rates. Also the original kind of builders of the Element protocol, and Council, which is a decentralized governance system. So you're kind of really focused on R&D within the space, but in terms of my role, it's really focused on product development. And I'm excited to be here today. And yeah, as we kind of move on to the next slide, just want to let everyone know that if you do want to reach out to us, DeFiToronto@gmail.com, or find us on Twitter, and feel free to message us if you'd like to share any announcements or present at a future meetup. This is definitely still very community oriented, and we'd love to have community members chime in with what they're working on and any other research that they're currently involved in. All right. So we'll jump to the agenda. So this is going to be a really interesting, I think, meetup, because like the DeFi news recap is often like one of the favorite, parts of the meetup for a lot of people. It really gives us kind of like perspective on what's happened in the space over the last month or so. And usually we're a little bit strapped for time when we do that, but this time we're not. So we got Imran and Johnson who are going to run through that. And then, as I mentioned, Victor is going to give us a really interesting presentation on layer twos, specifically as relates to Ethereum. Ravi isn't able to join us today, so instead we'll just open it up for an informal discussion with everyone that's here. All right, with that said, I will pass it off to Imran and Johnson.
Thank you, Aleem. So to kick off this month's news recap, I would like to first just zoom out over the entire past 2 years. This is a chart of like 2022 to 2023, and what we can see is that after like a brutal 2022, Bitcoin rebounded from the depths like of this year, like with almost like 100% year-to-date growth. And there are several reasons for this. Like earlier, it was due to like the bank runs, but then most recently due to ETFs. And the reason I'm showing Bitcoin here, even though it's not core DeFi, is because Bitcoin kind of represents like this overall sentiment for like the crypto market in general. And this kind of speculation leads to like overall building activity for all the protocols, projects, VC funding, things like that. Who knows, maybe founders who pivoted to AI, VCs who pivoted to AI, they might be coming back pretty soon, but we'll see. We'll see. On to the next slide. Now, a little more going in depth into the protocols. What recently happened is that Arbitrum had about like 15 million tokens that were unclaimed during the initial period, and they ran a voting process where many of the projects could list for a grant and say like, okay, what are they going to use the ARB tokens for, and then they could put that grant to a vote, and the Arbitrum DAO members could vote on it. And what we saw is that a lot of DeFi protocols, especially native Arbitrum DeFi protocols, they gained quite a bit of ARB tokens and funding. The top one being GMX, which is a perpetual protocol, gained about 12 million Arbitrum tokens and funding, which they will be distributing as trade incentives, liquidity incentives, and like integrations with other projects. But we could see that the majority is like almost 85% of it is going towards like traders and liquidity providers. And this is not just the case with GMX, like some of the other top protocols are also like perpetual protocols on Arbitrum. And most of it, about, I think, a rough figure would be like around 80% of it is going towards trading incentives and liquidity incentives. So if you're like looking to get some ARB tokens, just let's say by providing liquidity, then this is worth checking out because this distribution, it's a very short-term distribution plan. It's not like meant to be distributed over, let's say, 4 or 5 years. It's meant to be distributed by the end of Jan. And that's the window from now till the end of Jan. I believe Arbitrum should have been announcing this distribution start like today or tomorrow. They've already teased it with a tweet already, but then we'll see. So just putting this on your radar out there. Next slide. Another phenomenon that we've been seeing recently in the borrowing and lending spaces with respect to the different kind of stablecoins, um, specifically real-world asset-backed stablecoins providing yields of something like 4 to 5% are becoming more and more favorable compared to DeFi stablecoins, which are minted by having ETH as collateral. Now, that said, these DeFi stablecoins, even though their total volume is going down, it's not like they are like losing their peg or anything. They are maintaining their peg. But to maintain their peg, like there is a lot of redemptions happening. Basically, people getting these DeFi stablecoins from the market at a lower price, and then they redeem it against the protocol, gain the collateral, and then because of that, there's a high collateral ratio. So if, let's say, if you want to borrow 100 LUSD, now the collateral ratio is something like 200%. So for that means like for every $100, you need to put up $200 worth of ETH in collateral. Before that wasn't the case, and this is the case now because of the real world stablecoins taking over that volume. And there's also like a big arbitrage opportunity that's also driving this factor. Basically, MakerDAO, Frax, these stablecoins offer like 4 to 5% yields backed by real world assets. That's where the yield comes from. But then for DeFi backed stablecoins, let's say LUSD, for example, they don't offer any yield directly. So what people do is, what many people do is that they put up collateral in ETH, borrow LUSD, swap it for MakerDAO, swap it for DAI, and then lend out the DAI and get that 4 to 5% APY yields. But then as more and more people do it, like that opportunity is diminishing. Nonetheless, it's yet to see like where this phenomenon will lead to. If the real world yields do come down, it's very much likely that DeFi stablecoins volume will go up, while at the same time not losing its peg to the dollar. But it's yet to be seen. And that's it from my end. I'll hand it over to Imran.
Awesome. I have just a couple of slides and more on the regulator end and what's kind of happening legally for crypto within, America, but broadly the Western Hemisphere. So this is probably coming to Canada at some point, but crypto tax reporting is going to change kind of the way crypto DEXs are handled in North America and in the US specifically first. And we've kind of seen that with Uniswap and what they're doing with hooks and people building KYC pools and preparing for what could be the eventuality of having some sort of collection of personal data at the network level or at the front end level at the very least, because Uniswap and tools like that will be forced to collect user data like the username, address, and tax reporting information so that they can actually put these proposals through. And the question remains, is all this being done by the government to kind of put some brakes on the space because the reporting requirements are just too onerous? As the second tweet kind of talks about how 8 billion new returns will have to be filed every year based upon these requirements, which will be just too much for teams to handle, and how they respond to it is an open-ended question. So in the future, I kind of hope that people run their own front ends. There's tools out there, and they're probably still in their infancy, where you can run your own front end if KYC is done by these DEXs, and you're not able to kind of use their front ends. You might be forced to, if you want to avoid KYC, to run your own front end and connect directly to the smart contracts. So something to consider as we go forward. Next slide. And then the next slide is about CBDCs. Christine Lagarde talked about it. She had this video on Twitter. I'm sure you guys have seen it or not, but discussing a digital euro. you know, they're kind of here in general. We already know they're being talked about, and this is kind of like the first step to really roll it out. And in the video, she kind of promises that they'll keep cash around, you know, pinky swear. But the question is, is cash going to remain long term or not? So eventually, all countries are kind of going to, go down that direction, and issue their own CBDCs. And I think, those, native stable coins right now that are really struggling with redemptions, as Johnson had mentioned. As rates come down for real world assets, so like T-bills and that kind of stuff, then we might see a revival of just fully decentralized stable coins. But this is kind of the end of the euro dollar system, where offshore money, US has a certain amount of US dollars in the country, and then they're not able to kind of see what's happening outside the country. So there's what's called the euro dollar system. I'm not sure if you guys all know about it, but it's basically when other countries who don't use US dollars as their native currency issue other dollars on top of that, and they kind of rehypothecate their US dollars, and that's called the euro dollar system. If countries are able to roll out CBDCs, then you'll kind of the opaqueness of that system will be drawn in, and the US will get better visibility into how US dollars are being used around the world. And I think that's kind of the goal for every country in the world, is to not have this shadow banking system that exists offshore, and being hands in on all the offshore dollars. So yeah, something to think about. But use LUSD and RAI. That's kind of my recommendation. Digital native crypto stablecoins. Next slide. And then the final one is the UK, talking about it's all really negative news, but I figured I'd bring it to people's attention because not everyone's following this kind of stuff. But the US government can now seize your coins without conviction. So if you go to the UK and they find a reason to seize your funds, anybody, like the local cops, the local law enforcement has broad scope to seize assets. They don't really need a reason to do it. No conviction is required. They've already seized about 100 million pounds of crypto, and these sweeping powers means that you have to kind of be more vigilant about how you transport and store your crypto. And my recommendation is to use a passphrase if you can, use a smart contract wallet, use a multi-sig, and kind of get rid of your ledger. One of the things about Ledger recently is they rolled out their recovery system, but they basically have the key to all your crypto. If the government came and asked for seizure of those assets, they could do it. So I would not use the ledger, and I would probably use some sort of multi-sig in lieu of all that's happening out there. But yeah, those are my slides. Happy to discuss anything about that in the future, and or we have some time here anyways to discuss things maybe after Victor gets his talk. We can kind of talk about all this stuff. But yeah, I'll leave it over to Victor.
Yeah. Imran, I actually have some question related to your slide. Whoops, go back. For euro dollar, would you consider a tether, the USDT, would you consider as more like a euro dollar, that they are offshore, it is US dollar, but you could, I was thinking that maybe USDC, that the Circle issued US dollar stablecoin, is more like an onshore US dollar, where USDT is the offshore US dollar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't know, like, it's still opaqueness, right? We don't know how much tether exists out there, if any, they're holding any real US dollars, right? So they could be holding $1,000 of T-bills for all we know, right? So there is an opaqueness, and there is a reapplication. It might not be that they're not holding the amount that they say they are, right? So it's certainly an element of a Eurodollar system, but I think it's even worse in some respects because it's not watched by the banking system. The Eurodollar system exists within the regulated offshore banking system, right? So there is some visibility into those companies, whereas Tether is just like a full-on criminal organization for all we know, right? But it is like a Eurodollar system, correct? Yeah. So at some point, either it'll be, brought into the U.S. system or like under the U.S.'s purview or outlawed or wherever it might be. But it seems like USDT, the people that are running that show are listening to regulators and blocking accounts and stuff. So there might be an element where they're actually working with the regulators here. So I don't know what the connection is, but they certainly are open to like freezing accounts and doing that kind of stuff. So it makes me feel like there's more of a connection there than we realize. Do you know what I mean?
In terms of CBDC, a couple of years ago, China was testing Chinese yuan, digital yuan, but last year or so just very quiet, which I don't know whether that plan is still alive or not. What I heard is that the bureaucrat in charge of that program was being removed for some reason, and so far they have not, after his removal, there's no much activity, pilot program or testing. It's very quiet.
So I was just going to add to this slide that they seem to have added this SIM swap SIM feature, where your SIM for the phone is now linked to your wallet and that kind of stuff. So I think it's being actively developed, but the pilot programs they had running didn't get received very well in China. Like no one really using it, even though they're giving out free money. Obviously, it was a nominal amount, but people didn't respond. And it's probably because there's no need, right? Everything is already digital in China, right? You can already pay with Alibaba and Alipay and that kind of stuff. So, in my opinion, they're probably going to just take over Alipay. You know what I mean? And issue their digital one on top of that, or force Alipay to use digital one behind the scene, because this system makes it really easy to track money across borders, right? If you use a dollar in like a US dollar in Europe, right, like a physical US dollar, no one can really tell and see that you're using it. Or if you issue money against that US dollar, no one can see it. But let's say those dollars weren't around and the only legal tender the US government recognizes was the CBDC, then that person overseas would not want to take in your physical cash. They'll want the one that's recognized by the US government, right? So I think if you look at all the money that's sitting offshore, like Panama and all that kind of stuff, they want to reshore all that money, at some point. So basically they'll say, either you reshore this money right now and it'll recognize it, and you have to pay tax on it, or that money's now worthless and not recognized within 6 months, right? And then now what do you do, right? You're basically stuck. You have to do it. So and the cash is the end goal. It has to be.
On this one, my comment is that I just put on my economist hat. I do feel there's economic incentive for government to tax crypto simply because the deficit. In the U.S. you see the debt ceiling is keep bumping the debt ceiling, so they need money, but inflation is an issue. So if they can increase the tax revenue, that means that they can keep funding the program to give out candy to the voters so that they may get elect. The same story in Canada. Like yesterday, the Bank of Canada after the announcement of the interest rate decision, it talked about federal government was try to expand the spending, grow the spending by 2% a year, and they are not very happy because basically you're stimulating the demand, which will drive up the inflation. So I suspect the government want the money. Like if they can tax more money, they would like to have more money. That's my take. It's not saying that they don't have the intention to kill crypto, but the economic incentive is very strong, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 points there. I think one, they want to make it onerous to kind of hold your own crypto and connect directly to these protocols, right? They want to make it as difficult as possible. Maybe they don't necessarily realize it, but they're really trying to make it not easy to do with these regulations, and they're kind of forcing the hand of all these dexes. And if you look at like when currencies reset, like in the 1930s, you had Executive Order 6102 that made everybody give up their gold. So gold is kind of an off valve in that time to, if the government's, printing a bunch of money, people, run to gold and they hold gold to preserve their purchasing power, which the government doesn't want. So they force people to turn over their gold, or they would face time in prison or $10,000 fines, which at the time was like, $1 million, worth $1 million, whatever it was. It's worth a lot of money. And then basically the goal is to close all the exits, right? You want to close the exits to exit from crypto. You want to close the exits to leave from gold. And it doesn't really matter if you control all the gold or all the crypto, then all the exits are closed. And if you don't let people trade directly with each other, and you force them to trade directly through exchanges, which you can then get the user's ID and information. You can tax all those gains, and you kind of know what everybody owns anyways, right? So and then you have the ETF, which basically you kind of give your crypto to BlackRock, and BlackRock is basically a government agency, and then they kind of can do what they want with their crypto at that point, right? They can rehypothecate it if they want. They can or do whatever they want at that time. But yeah, so the goal is really to close all the exits and then financially repress the population through inflation, and then you reset the debt. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ben has a comment saying that tax reporting is number one reason I'm not active in the DeFi. Yeah, it is very unclear. So recently, Coin Center wrote a letter to the Congress, some member of the Congress. One of the recommendations is have they call the minimum list tax allowance. So basically, currently, if you use foreign currency and you have some gain and loss, there's allowance. I think it's maybe a 500 or 1,000 US dollar or something that you do not have to report it. You don't have to check, every time you go to US and then, how much profit do I gain because of appreciation of the Canadian US dollar, those kind of things. So they argue, Coin Center argue that you should have the same similar allowance. If a small amount, you shouldn't bother the taxpayer just to try to track this small amount of dollar, just waste of time, human capital, time and energy. So yeah, that's what I learned recently.
The problem with declaring your crypto is that eventually the government will come and confiscate it at some point.
Yeah, once you declare it's definitely.
Yeah, because they're eventually going to ask for your addresses, and then they're going to confiscate it if it gets bad enough.
Yeah, it's bad enough. Yeah.
Imran, you know, when you said reset the debt, like you were just talking about, once the off ramps or the exits rather are like closed, and there's really no way to kind of exit the system. And then, they kind of force you into the fiat cycle again, uh and then the government resets the debt. Are you talking about like the government essentially monetizing the debt, and then all the citizens essentially incurring that cost, right? Through inflation.
Yeah. I mean, it happens every time there's a currency reset, right? They close the exit, so you can't leave the system, and you're forced to use their money. And then they print like hell, and they use that money to finance whatever they want to finance at the time, whether it's war, whether it's infrastructure, whatever it might be, and you're forced to kind of use their money and pay for that yourself, right? Through your living standards, that kind of stuff. Now, if there's an exit through crypto or gold or whatever it might be, then you kind of they can't push that lever, right? Because gold prices would spike and crypto prices would spike, and there'd be a clamoring for those kind of assets, right? To avoid that currency reset, they won't be holding those assets. Well, if they're holding on those assets through BlackRock and stuff, they might not mind as much, like what happened in the 70s. If they don't hold those assets, they don't want those assets being an off valve for their printing of money. But yeah, currency repression is always the end goal of a currency reset, and the population pays for it.
I'd just like to make a comment on this slide of Johnson's. So Bitcoin, we don't talk a lot about Bitcoin on our meetup, partially because that I will still consider Bitcoin a decentralized asset, but it doesn't have the other service, decentralized service on top of it. So for example, you cannot do decentralized exchange, decentralized lending, those kind of things. But the good news is that it seems recently I saw some potential innovation. Early this year or last year, we had the Ordinal, which you can issue NFT on Bitcoin blockchain. Recently, there's a white paper just come out called BVM. Basically, it's a Bitcoin virtual machine. The author argued that you could make the Bitcoin scripting language more expressive, able to do something, something like a smart contract. There's some pushback among the Bitcoin community saying that it's not very scalable, is just not able to do well. But that's just a white paper, so we still don't know what reality will happen. And then a Lightning Lab just launched mainnet alpha called Taproot Asset. Basically, with this protocol, you can issue stablecoin or tokenize real world asset. So good to see that the Bitcoin community have some innovation, and we still have to see how in reality how scalable. As you know, that the scripting language of the Bitcoin is very restrictive by design, because they want security.
Have you guys used Lightning Network? Anybody here? Anybody tried it? Just drop in the messages if you have. But I mean, recently, I think like maybe a couple of days ago, one of the developers on Lightning Network came and said, like, what do you do with all these failed transactions? Because if you actually use Lightning, you'll notice that you get a lot of drop transactions. And her response was just send the same transaction more than once.
Oh,
so you
dropped.
Yeah, so you get drop transactions, but then her response was, instead of like having a solution for it, she's just like, send the same transactions again and again until it goes through.
You're spending fees every time.
Spending fees every time. You're also you don't know which one's going to go through, so you could say you really send $2, you send it like 5 times, you send $10, and what, $6 goes
Yeah.
through and you just do it again. So
Okay.
I mean, the Lightning Network, it's had 4, 5, 6 years now to get working, and it just I don't think it's a solution. And Bitcoin in general has, put blockers on any sort of scaling efforts, right? And even like, if you look at the teams that are building, internally, like the Blockstream, for instance, launched their own like wallet, right? Their own like it's called Green Wallet or something like that, or some service. And I don't believe it's decentralized, right? And that's like the core team, Blockstream, who runs Bitcoin, the development of Bitcoin, right? And they don't even have a decentralized solution to work. So yeah, I'm not too optimistic. I'm more optimistic on Solana, to be quite fair with you, about scaling. And then it's obviously Ethereum L2s, which Victor's going to talk about today. But yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Okay. Any comment or question about Imran and Johnson's news recap? If you want, you can just raise your hand or just unmute. We have a small group today, so you can just unmute yourself and speak.
We could even continue the discussion after if you like, Victor, and you can jump into the.
Okay. Okay, I will.
That was really interesting conversation. So glad we had that opportunity because we don't usually. So it's great.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the L2, particularly on Ethereum. So as many of you know, aware that the Ethereum mainnet, the layer 1, has a limitation of on the bandwidth. They usually can do about 13, 14 transaction per second. So, and sometimes can get congested and become very expensive. So there's two ways to scale up. One way is to engineer the layer 1 for scaling, but there's layer 2 can also do something. You can build something on top of Ethereum that to help scale up the transaction speed and throughput. So that's the main topic of today. So what's the benefit is that if you can increase the throughput, you will make the transaction cheaper and faster. That way you can allow more application, more people to use it, more application to use it. So that's the main benefit. And so that's so one of the most popular so far, the most popular scaling method is roll up. So basically, roll-up is that you take the transaction off-chain and combine them into a single transaction. Then you register on the mainnet. So that's the most popular one. Before roll-up, you probably remember a few years ago, state channel, sidechain, plasma was popular. But now it seems that if you look at the total value lock, roll-up is by far the most popular the scaling method. So here, let me close this. Here is the scaling, the transaction speed compare between the Ethereum mainnet and the layer 2 scaling solution. So the red line is basically combine all the scaling solution on top of Ethereum, how many transactions per second to show in aggregate. So on that particular day, like yesterday, I put this slide together, is about 40 or 40, 50 transaction per second, where the Ethereum mainnet is still roughly around 13 transactions per second, and based on the last 7 days average, this particular website called L2B calculator is about a factor of 5. So basically, if the mainnet is 10 transactions per second, that means that off the chain and on layer 2, you can achieve totally, say, 50 transactions per second. So you basically increase number of transactions can be implemented on the Ethereum ecosystem. And here's some milestone. The first major trigger event was in August 2021 when Arbitrum launched their network. Then you see a huge jump in terms of transaction per second on the L2. Then followed by Arbitrum Nova, and then more recently is the ZK rollup. Okay. Then this one is to give you an idea. If people use L2 solution, that means that they have to put Ether or other asset on their platform. So this chart shows the aggregate all the value locked on the L2. So the red line here I show particularly is denominated in Ether term. The reason I show that is because the Ether price has been up and down until recently. So I want to get a sense that underlying the actual asset, how number of ETH equivalent asset on the network, how much is there, and then you can see people keep putting in more and more Ether or other equivalent asset. So it shows you that the L2 has experienced a very healthy growth. Then let's dive in on the detail of the top popular L2 scaling platform. So here I'm listing top 6. Arbitrum is number 1 based on the total value locked, which is $6.5 billion. Then followed by Optimism Base, then followed by ZK Sync, DYDX, and StarNet. And then there's a many smaller one which I'm not listing here because the total value lock is it's very small. Interesting things is that you notice that the top 3 is used based on the same scaling technology. The optimistic rollup, the second 3, the 4th to the 6th is based on ZK rollup. So it's interesting the grouping here. And then I list the current transaction per second and also the fastest transaction speed they record since they launched, because the website has a time series line, so I can find out what's the fastest they ever achieved. And then you can see that Arbitrum once was able to achieve 31 transaction per second, compared to the current is only achieved 7.5, where ZK Sync can achieve 15 as the fastest speed. Now let's look at value capture. So L2, all this platform provide a service to the community, to the user, to the app developer. Well, they should get paid, right? There's a capital requirement to build a network, to maintain a network. So some of the L2 platform has their own token. Some do not have their own token. For example, Base, which run by Coinbase, it doesn't have a token. ZK Sync still have no token yet, but could be coming. So I'm just list a few at the top that has token, so I can also the one that they actually charge a fee to using it. Then you can see what's the value capture, and then I compare, calculate the ratio of their market cap, the entire dilute market cap to the revenue to the protocol, and then you get a sense of the valuation. And then I compare to Ethereum. So obviously Ethereum generates a lot of fees, but its market cap also very large. So it's good to apple comparison. I will just using the market cap to revenue ratio, which is very similar to price to sales ratio in the traditional finance when you look at the company. As you can see that Arbitrum, Optimism, they are all over 300x relative to their revenue, at a higher, much higher than Ethereum. Polygon is even higher, is over 1000x. DYDX seems doing quite well, given that their market cap, their revenue is relatively high compared to the market cap, so their multiple is 30x. So give you a sense of how much value they can capture and how much the market cap reflect or investor willing to pay for those revenue. So why is L2 important? The reason why L2 important is that if you remember over the last few years, there's a lot of new blockchain try to compete with Ethereum, because Ethereum at the time was not scalable and expensive. There's a lot of new blockchain. Remember EOS? They were claiming to be very scalable. They raised $4 billion. I don't know why you ever need a $4 billion to build a new blockchain. So that's a different topic. So Ethereum was under a lot of criticism, but as Vitalik pointed out, there's this blockchain trilemma you have to keep in mind. There's a trade-off between scalability, security, and the decentralization. Sometimes if you try to change one, you will weaken the others. So it's not easy to try to scale up your platform without reduce either the security or reduce the decentralization. For example, if your blockchain is very high throughput, you can make 10,000 transactions per second, and you are also very cheap. Each transaction is 0.0001 cents. What happens is that you can be easily being attacked by conduct a DDoS attack to jam the network, make it unusable. So the other one downside is that, let's say you sacrifice decentralization, you only have 21 validator as Binance or as EOS had, then this 21 validator can subject to bribery. You can bribe them. If you pay them money, they may do the things not the benefit for the network. So there's always trade-off when you try to increase one of those factors. The other may suffer. Other factor may suffer. So keep that in mind. Once somebody try to promote a new blockchain, tell you, we do something so much better than Ethereum, there's always question, what's the trade-off? And here, give you a sense the trade-off. So one way to measure decentralization is to look at, for proof of stake blockchain, you can look at the validation, the number of validators. So the more validator, the hard is to bribe them, right? It's hard to attack them without have to, convince so many validators to follow, to do something that is not a benefit. And same time, you can also look at the staking market cap, how much value is locked up to do the proof of stake. And that amount also give you a sense of the economic security of the network. So here I compare several major proof of stake blockchain like Cardano, Solana, Avalanche, Algorand, Binance, and EOS. And you can see there's a trade-off, right? Binance can only have 21 validator. They probably can do very, very high transaction per second, but they sacrificed the decentralization. Same story with EOS, where Cardano and Solana, they also have decent amount of validator, but is nothing compared to Ethereum. On the staking market cap side, you can see that some of them staking market cap is very small. For example, Algorand is only have about $200 million worth of token stake. So if you can buy, if you have more than 200 million worth of capital, you could attack it by control more stakers. So that's give you a sense of the security and the decentralization based on two simple matrix. And here is what happened, what's the impact of Ethereum L2's performance. So if Ethereum able to scale up its transaction speed through the L2, in addition to the L1 innovation, then it will weaken the narrative of the competing chain that if they solely try to sell you scalability, right? If Ethereum can do better and at the same time can maintain the decentralization, then people will say, well, I may stay with Ethereum because it's more secure, more decentralized. So I'm here just quickly compare the market cap and also the price change over the last 60 days and the last 1 year. In recent 2 months, Solana and the Tron has doing quite better than Ethereum in terms of the price return. But if you look at the 1 year, almost every Ethereum competitor has underperformed, with the exception of Tron. So that's the impact of Ethereum that able to improve their scalability. So if you want to build a new blockchain from now, I suspect you cannot try to convince the community. It's much more difficult to try to convince the community saying that, oh, we're more scalable than Ethereum. The story, it just won't fly anymore. You have to have some unique value proposition to attract capital. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of last chart here, slide here, just about Polygon. As you know that we originally invite a speaker from Polygon. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it because the business travel and time zone difference. So I want to try to show you Polygon is one of the L2, but it's not among the top in terms of the total value lock. It's relatively small. Here I show you that the purple line I show you is on the right left-hand side is the price, the token price, and then the revenue, how much revenue they're able to generate from the transaction. In a dollar term, they all go down quite a bit, but perhaps it's not very clear because we'll have a bear market across the board, so it's hard to tell whether they're doing well or not doing well relative to other blockchain. So on the right-hand side, so what I did is that I look at the total value lock in the magic term, so in their native token. So I remove the price impact of the token. Just look at how many their native token has been locked up on their platform. As you can see that it has been come down quite a bit. Used to be as much as 7 billion Matic token or equivalent value that lock up on the Polygon network, but now is just over 1 billion token lockup. So definitely there's a decline in the usage of the lockup on the Polygon network. Perhaps not surprisingly, that Polygon has launched a new 2.0 development plan. So we were hoping that our speaker, Ravi, was able to talk about the Polygon 2.0 roadmap. So I'm just provide a link here on below, or you can just Google it to see what they are planning to do. And I think it is a pivotal moment for Polygon to compete with other, L2 scaling solution. Okay, that's all I have here for on the L2. Open up to questions, discussions, comments.
I think we have a question in the chat from Tony.
Okay, so Tony, your question is, can you address the challenge of composability between L2? I'm not very knowledgeable on the composability side of L2, so I'm afraid I don't have any, insight to share. Anybody else from the team? Anybody else among the audience like to talk about composability?
I don't know enough either, but I believe there's some solutions in the works where there's kind of like a middle layer, like layer 0, I think, or something like that are working on kind of composability of assets across networks. But yeah, I don't have enough information myself.
Okay. Sorry, Tony, that we didn't give you. Maybe I will look into it to educate myself. We can chat next time.
Hey, Victor, I got a question for you if I can chat.
Sure.
Yeah, so back to the staking validators. So I think what's an interesting point is, so that number is pretty big with Ethereum, but I guess the question is what's the concentration, right? Because I'm obviously more of a, from a Cardano perspective, that's what I'm more familiar with. So obviously we've got, there's a lot of stake pools, but the distribution's pretty good. There's not a lot of centralization. But Ethereum, you have like, you need the 32 ETH, I think. So
yep.
There's a lot of pooling of that to stake pool providers like Lido, for example. So I think that's also an interesting, like the count itself is maybe not that useful as a decentralization index. It's really around what's the distribution of stake? Is it controlled by stakers? But if you have any thoughts on that, I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts.
As you mentioned Lido, apparently Lido, the number of Ether stake on Lido is 32% of all the circulating Ether. So there's some concern because when you reach 33%, you can pose centralization risk to the network. So there's quite a bit of discussion on that. For example, EigenLayer developer was pushing to penalize, not necessarily penalize, I would say reward the stake Ether from less dominant platform. For example, Rocket Pool. Rocket Pool is smaller, so if you take the stake Ether from Rocket Pool, you will get more reward on EigenLayer compared to Lido. So that's one of the proposal. I still don't know how we're going to address this yield gap. So on Lido, if you stake, you get about 3.6% yield yesterday, APY yesterday, and then compared to Rocket Pool, which is using different incentive mechanism, you can only receive like a 3.1%. So you have almost a 0.5% yield gap. Is definitely a tough sell if you try to convince people, say, go to stake on a Rocket Pool because it's decentralized compared to Lido. So that's one thing. You make a good point on that. And the other one is that a validator. Yeah, the validator, there's some concern about some validators running on the cloud, centralized cloud, like AWS, that's also a concern, because you could potentially be shut down by Amazon or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely some concern, but it's a permissionless blockchain, so we cannot force people to everyone to run their own nodes, right?
Oh, wow.
And so yeah.
So this
I hope
this is exactly, it's a good point again. And so it's interesting just from a perspective of with Cardano, because it's it's designed to basically that to be a validator, you don't need significant amount of hardware. It's actually can be run on a desktop. So that incentivizes anyone to kind of, and it's decent, it's permissionless. Anyone can set up a validator. So those things that I think are favorable for that decentralization. At least that's what I see. And then obviously the protocol on Cardano has a parameter that reduces incentives once you get too big, but that can be a game that's not the best. But I think really what's the big thing is that just anyone can run a validator. I ran a validator, right? I just did it on a small PC that can be run. So that was obviously, it's hard to get to that stage, and obviously Ethereum's a different beast because it's got quite a big blockchain and global state. There's a lot of data. So anyway, that's just wanted to point that out. But but I agree with you. It's something to be aware of. Like Solana is a perfect example where those validators are monstrous, right? You need to have like terabytes of data. Like the centralization that occurs on those, I don't know where that number of validators comes from, but absolutely, that's why they could restart their network. That's why they went down like, I don't know, 9 or 10 times in the last year or two, and they get a bunch of validators together and go, hey, we're going to reboot the network, because they don't have a big community. So
exactly, apparently even the hardware requirement was so high that you need an initial investment 80,000 or something to just buy all the hardware, and then you have to pay. Apparently, to run a validator, you have to pay to the network. There's a levy from the network that you have to stake or contribute or something like that. So it's quite expensive.
And I think it's important. Like, people miss the point of decentralization, because with the blockchains, you're having a consensus agreement on the transaction's validity. So it's a really important but subtle point that you need to be worried about that. Otherwise, exactly, you can have your transaction be censored or rolled back or whatnot. So there is no gatekeeper of everything. So it is a really important thing, and you don't see it. Like, obviously, you think everything's fine until it's not. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to privacy. Is that nobody care about privacy until until you have been personalized, right? So or the police knock on your door because they don't like what you say on the social media.
Thanks for the talk, guys. That's great. I'm gonna have to go soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, then I'll pass back to our MC, Aline. Pass back to you.
Hey guys, all right. I think that was some interesting Q&A, and Victor, very enlightening presentation just on the L2 space. And I think I just wanted to make one comment around like concentration. I think that is definitely a pretty big issue with Lido. I think the last time I checked, the liquid staking distribution, I think Lido was at like 32% a couple of weeks ago. And there tends to be more concentration even within Lido, whereas with rocket pools, the whole idea is to incentivize a larger distribution of individual node operators on the network, who are facilitating all of the liquid staking. And you can liquid stake and run your own node with as little as 8 ETH in rocket pool, where I don't think that's possible actually in Lido. So I'm pretty bullish.
Lido actually is the validator does not require to have any deposit themselves. It's a vet by the DAO. So where Rocket Pool is decentralized, permissionless, so you can run without anybody's approval as long as you have it Ether, and also you have a stake some Rocket Pool token as well.
That's right. And if you do run your own node, and I think the minimum is 8 ETH, to do that, I believe the yield is actually pretty juicy. I think it's around 7 point something %. Plus you get RPL rewards for their native token. And yeah, ultimately it's like also looking at the fees, because with Lido, I know they charge a 10% fee, which goes to partially to node operators and then, you know, to the DAO treasury. And I can't remember what the fee structure is for Rocket Pool.
5% to the node operator, 5% to the treasury.
Okay, so 5 and 5.
Yeah, 5 and 5.
Okay.
So half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay, so it's very like pretty much identical as well. But that concentration issue is a pretty big one, and like I think to the future, and I think like as larger institutions start to get involved in ETH staking, like in Canada, you know, we just recently saw that 3IQ, large asset manager, you know, with publicly traded Ethereum ETFs and Bitcoin ETF as well. I think it's QBTC and QETH, right? Now they've actually unlocked staking, so you can actually participate directly in Ethereum staking yield. Of course, they're also taking a fee themselves and probably outsourcing a lot of the infrastructure for the staking itself, which means you're going to get less than like what you would get either through, like, I'm sure through Lido or through Rocket Pool. But if you're a large institution and there's this huge risk, like, you know, think about BlackRock coming in and like there's this risk of like moving a liquid staking platform, you know, network from like 30% to like 50% just with like a little bit of capital. And for them, a little bit of capital could be like trillions of dollars, you know, especially if we're talking like the large, like the Fidelities, the BlackRocks, etc. So not that they would allocate that much right off the bat, but you know, I'm sure it would be in the billions of dollars from the outset. So that could further jeopardize the whole you know, liquid staking you know, distribution problem and the concentration issue. So I think there are platforms that are emerging now that will allow you to you know, deposit your crypto and then it'll automatically allocate the crypto to different liquid staking providers, so that you're actually minimizing the concentration issue. Your yield may not be as good as if you were just going all in on Lido, for example, but it's going to be pretty close. But at the same time, you're contributing to Ethereum security and decentralization. So my feeling is that large institutions, when they come in and they are already coming into staking indirectly, you know, they're going to be very aware of the concentration issue. And allocating capital accordingly to not exacerbate that issue further. But yeah, that's I was just listening and like I was just doing a bit of digging, and like that conversation was super interesting. So, but yeah, I guess we can you know, we can kind of open it up again for some questions if there are any from the group here, and if there aren't, then we can kind of make it this short and sweet and tie a bow around this meetup. And then look forward to our next one, which will hopefully be in person next month. Any questions from anyone in the audience?
I saw Manjoy was asking if there's any open source project he can join as an intern.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of if you join the Discord for any of the DeFi projects, they'll usually announce like when they have opportunities for community members to get more involved, like either like it's like an internship or it could just be with like a one-off something. It could, a lot of times it's related to growth and marketing. But I would say if there's a project you're following, join the Discord and become active there, and you can just ask them, and oftentimes they do hire interns. Do you guys have any other, Victor or Johnson, do you guys have any other insight there around how they can get involved?
I don't have any like insight onto like how to get these projects, but I would say like definitely keep an eye out, like how you said, like many projects, open source projects, they have their discourse that would mostly be a best bet. They don't usually post outside on job boards, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Cool. I think we can probably wrap it up there. But yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us for this meetup. Thanks Johnson and Imran for the amazing DeFi recap, and Victor for the amazing insights around the L2 space, including some of the really interesting ways that we can kind of compare activity across the L2s and their market caps and ultimately like value. Yeah, I guess we'll kind of cap it there, and we'll continue at the next meetup. So stay tuned for that. Johnson or Victor, do you guys have any idea what's the date for the next one? It's the end of
November 30th. November 30th.
November 30th.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll see you guys there. Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.